So, welcome back everyone. We will continue with letter D, and also we fixed some audio issues. Yeah, shall we start? We found several sites that present pros and cons of the hamburger, as well as any ways in which the hamburger can be improved. Let's just make it bigger. Two of which are listed at the end of this activity. Arguments in favor of this pattern include that it is clear, simple, and widely recognized. However, it also argued that options in the hamburger are hidden and may appear to be less important. They also seem to have less engagement than other menu styles and require more actions, clicks to access. To help overcome the disadvantages, the icon could be made more obvious or made eye-catching through animation or embellishment. Primary options can be displayed using other menu types such as accordion menu, which also saves screen space. So to help the disadvantage of hamburger menu, you can also use this accordion menu to save screen space. The delicious name of this navigation style comes from icon's resemblance to a tasty hamburger. And just like the hamburger, you can eat the hamburger, you can click store all its features, well organized and hidden to save space on the plate. Non-essential items. Not all websites have the minimum number of items. Work, services, about us, blog, contact. In fact, most websites include a lot more menu options, most of which don't attract as much traffic as their main pages. Including these items in the main navigation will only clutter the page. The best solution is to put them off screen in the navigation drawer. Profile settings and list. When it comes to apps that require the creation of accounts, the hamburger menu is the most intuitive and logical place to store all profile settings, favorites, likes, save items, and other lists. They also won't go in the user's way of executing repetitive usage patterns. Navigation items for e-commerce websites. With e-commerce, there's always second level of interaction with the profile, cart, wishlist, and searches. Usually it's best to keep those items in a hamburger menu so they won't clutter the page. Content dead zones. Content isn't always built around conversions and educations where you put your conversion strategy all out. Some websites need to have their navigation available at all times. In this case, there are content dead zones that heavily rely on primary navigation exploring. So this hamburger can also be used in content dead zones, which some websites need to have their navigation available at all times. The design patterns are a distillation of previous common practice, but one of the problems with common practice is that it is not necessarily good practice. Design approaches that represent poor practice are referred to as anti-patterns. A classic example of anti-pattern is click here, also referred to as mystery navigation. Dark patterns are not necessarily poor design, but they have been designed carefully to trick people, championing value to the organization over user value. For instance, some apparent dark patterns are just mistakes, in which case they will be corrected relatively quickly once identified. However, when a UX designer's knowledge of human behavior is deliberately used to implement deceptive functionality that is not in the user's best interest, that is a dark pattern. Linda in 2020 analyzed 240 mobile apps with 589 users and found that popular apps include on average at least 7 types of deceiving interfaces. For example, an option is pre-selected, there is a small close button on an advert, or double negatives are used in selection text. Nudging and persuasion are acceptable tactics in interaction design. for all sorts of reasons, including ones designed to improve health and well-being. It also depends on what persuasion is trying to achieve. For example, one of the patterns regarding rewards available on the UI pattern site is shaping, like the practice of breaking down persuasion into smaller chunks. So this breaking down of smaller chunks could be used as nudging to persuade good behavior. So in this case, this pattern is being used for good purpose. Using this pattern to encourage a positive behavior such as overcoming social inhibitions creates a different reaction than encouraging a less positive behavior such as buying something the user can afford. Open source resources. Open source software refers to source code for components, framework, or whole systems that is available for reuse or modification free of charge. Design systems are commonly released in open source repositories for others to see and use. For example, Microsoft's Fluent Design System. Open source development is a community-driven endeavor in which people produce, maintain, and enhance code, which is then provided to the community through an open source repository for further development and use. The community of open source committers, that is those who write and maintain the software, are mostly software developers who give their time for free, but increasingly companies releasing open source code are also releasing open source code. Many large pieces of software underlying our global digital infrastructure are powered by open source projects. For example, the operating system Linux, the development environment Eclipse, and PHP development language are all open source software. Another example is Bootstrap framework for front-end web development, released as open source in August 2011 and actively updated on a regular basis. So another thing with design language design language system is it actually closely related to open source. See figure 13.7. So this was created using the Bootstrap language or design language. This framework contains reusable code snippets, a screen layout grid that supports multiple screen sizes, and pattern libraries that include predefined sets of navigational patterns, typefaces, button, tabs, and so on. So these are a design language for front end. So we could have a host of different language for back end and for different types of use or interfaces. The framework and documentation are available through the GitHub open source repository. Most hosting services supports both public and private spaces. Submitting code to a public space means that anyone in the community can see and download the code. But in a private space, the source will be closed. One of the advantages of releasing code as open source is that many eyes can see, use, and modify your work, spotting security vulnerabilities or inefficient coding practices, as well as contributing to extending or improving its functionality. Other popular open source repositories are Bitbucket, SourceForge, and GitLab. Tools for interaction design. Available tools support creative thinking and collaboration, design, sketching, prototyping, simulation, evaluation, pattern library research, and mind mapping, and more. In fact, any aspect of the design process will have at least one associated support tool. For example, Miro and Mural support collaboration and brainstorming so that ideas can be generated and explored jointly. Sketch supports the creation of a wide range of drawings and screen layouts. So Sketch, it provides a wide range of drawings and screen layouts, while Miro and Mural support collaboration and brainstorming. Balsamic supports wireframing. Overflow.io supports the production of playable user flow diagrams, and uxarchive.com contains a large number of reusable user flows. Along with the increasing popularity of design systems, several tools also integrate a range of different features in one place, including brainstorming, prototyping, wireframing, and UI design kits with code snippets and patterns. For example, Figma supports a wide variety of collaborative design tasks, including generating wireframes and prototypes, and Adobe XD supports design, layout, animation, and voice prototyping. Some of the popular tools are available as open source or with free trials, and it's worth exploring the different features of each. Other commonly used tools are Balsamiq, Axure RP, and Sketch. Optimal Workshops is your all-in-one UX research toolbox, comprising 5 tools in total. Optimal Sort, a card sorting tool that shows you how your users categorize information. This helps you to plan information architecture of the product you're designing. For example, the structure of your website and how the content is organized. So the Optimal Sort is a card sorting tool that you can use to organize the information architecture of your product. So it's Optimal Workshop. It's an all-in-one UX research toolbox. TreeJock, a tree testing tool that helps you evaluate how people navigate and find information on your website. You can learn more in Optimal Workshop Tree Testing 101 guide. So a tree testing tool that allows you to easily find information, which is the common hurdle for users. Chalkmark, a first click testing tool which shows you where on an interface people would click first in order to complete a certain task. So it's kind of like tracking tool for advertisement where it tracks the first click before a user complete or click the advertisement. This helps you to design interfaces that your users will understand straight away. Questions for creating and sending out online surveys. You can also include screening questions to make sure you're recruiting the right participant for your research. So it also includes questions that allows you to quickly filter your participants. Reframer, a note-taking and documentation tool to organize insights gathered from qualitative research. So there's also a documentation tool that organizes insights from qualitative research or comments from users. Optimal Workshops allow you to conduct both qualitative and quantitative research. Once you've conducted your research, you'll get clear insights and data visualizations via the dashboard. This enables you to clearly see the results of your UX research and to communicate your findings with others. Loopback is a platform dedicated to conducting research via video. You may be wondering why you can't just use Zoom, and technically you can, but if you want to keep your video research streamlined, organized, and actionable, Loopback goes above and beyond. Conduct moderate user interviews via video call and capture timestamp notes throughout. So it allows you to capture timestamp note. It's kind of like in Teams where it allows you to convert the language in English while speaking. Set up virtual observation rooms to keep your teams in the loop. Virtual observation, kind of like screen share in Teams for administrator. Run moderated and unmoderated usability tests to see how users experience your apps and websites. You can run usability tests, moderated and unmoderated. So while you're interviewing or while you're conducting the research, and while you can also do that in direct permission from the user, where you ask them that you would do a usability test for them. Record and store all sessions in the cloud, so it is available on demand. Create highlight reels to capture and share the most important and insightful moments from your user research. So it allows you to create like a quotes or highlight reels that captures your user story. So here you can try Loopback with a 14-day trial. After that, you can choose from a range of paid plans. Freelance and affordable solo plan for $17 a month includes 10 sessions per year. 99 teams, 99 a month approximately for 100 sessions per year. Elsewhere, in this book, we have emphasized the value of low fidelity prototyping and its use in getting user feedback. As with any prototype, however, paper-based prototypes have their limitations and they do not support user-driven interaction. In recognition of this, developing interactive low-fidelity prototypes have been investigated through research for many years, like Segura in 2012, the latest efforts being focused on neural networking approaches, like in Solari 2018. The idea is that mid and high fidelity prototypes can be generated from low fidelity sketches, drawing on existing patterns, frameworks, and user flows, for example. So again, these have been combined. The user flows, patterns, design language, or design pattern, design system language uh, could be combined in low fidelity prototype, which in turn stem our mid to high level prototype. So we got the ideas for mid and high level from low, and then the existing framework or languages that are available tools. Tooling to support visual and interactive products, particularly apps for smartphones, desktop, and mobile, is well developed. But what about tools to support for the development of other interfaces as introduced in Chapter 7, interfaces such as Brain, holographic, or even virtual reality? For now, most of those that are available are still in the research lab. For example, George in 2021 described a tool to support the design of hand gesture recognizers for use with mixed reality applications. So, these are actually a tool that designed to recognize gestures with mixed reality applications. So those are for not common interfaces such as a mixed reality. But for phones and desktops and all common devices, the it almost well documented, so you can easily get all things that will allow you to get your project faster. So it's easier now. In-depth activity. This in-depth activity continues the work begun on the booking facility introduced at the end of Chapter 11. Assumes that you will produce the online booking facility using an agile approach. Suggests the type of user research to conduct before iteration cycle begins. Prioritize requirements for product according to business value. In particular, which requirements are likely to provide the greatest business benefit, and sketch out the UX design work you would expect to undertake during the first 4 iteration cycles, that is cycle 0 and cycles 1 to 3. Using one of the mock-up tools and introduce, generate a mock-up of the product's initial interface as developed in the assignment for Chapter 12. Using one of the patterns website listed previously, identify suitable interaction patterns for elements of the product, and develop a software-based prototype that incorporates all of the feedback and the result of the user experience mapping achieved at the end of Chapter 12. So basically, the first thing is that you need to conduct user research before the iteration cycle. You need to prioritize based on the user research you get. So using one of the mock-up tools, which is overall user experience, what else? Cardboard, storyboard, and card-based prototypes. You need to generate that to generate an initial interface. So you can find the interface type. It could be finding what the product function will do, how this function related, and then what's the other last thing? I forgot, but that's the, like, after the initial conceptual design, those are the 3 questions that you would ask. And then using one of the pattern website listed previously, identify suitable interaction patterns for elements of the product and develop a software-based prototype that incorporates all of the feedback and the result of the user experience mapping at the end of the Chapter 12. So since we've generated this user experience mapping earlier or in the previous video in the prototype, We will now determine, based on available existing patterns that are used to solve that specific issue for our user, um, how can we use the pattern on our specific context? Or better, shall we use an entire language to actually solve the issue? If you do not have experience in using any of this, create a few HTML web pages to represent the basic structure of the product. So if you can do all of this, you can just do a basic HTML to represent the structure of the product. Now, key points. Agile refers to approaches that integrate UX design activities with an agile approach to product development. So, it integrates the design activities or the tools, techniques for design with agile approach. A move to agile UX requires a change in mindset because of repeated prioritization of requirements and short time-based implementation, which seeks to avoid wasted effort. Agile UX requires rethinking of UX design activities, when to perform them, how much detail to undertake and when, and how to feedback results into implemented cycles. Design patterns present a solution to a problem in a context, and there are many UX design pattern libraries available. Dark patterns are designed to trick users into making choices that have undesired consequences, for instance, by automatically signing them up for marketing newsletter. Open source resources such as those on GitHub make the development of standard applications and libraries with consistent interfaces easier, quicker, and less costly. A variety of digital tools to support interaction design in practice are available. So there's actually digital tools that support all of these design techniques in practice that actually useful and available. So not just open source, but actually a closed source where you need to pay the actual product, because we often don't recognize it when it's free. Just kidding. So let's just move to introducing evaluation. So let's see. Oh my god. Yeah. Introducing evaluation. So evaluation is integral to design process. It involves collecting and analyzing data about users' experiences when interacting with the sketch, prototype, or component of a system. So it's about analyzing data when the user already interact with your initial prototype. Evaluation can happen during design, before a product is released, or even after a product is launched, with the aim of improving or addressing a pain point reported by a customer. So these evaluation are continuous. It could be done in present, past, and future state in design process. And the goal is to improve pain point or the UX problem. A central goal of evaluation is to improve its design. Evaluation focuses on both the usability of the product, that is how easy it is to learn and to use, and on the user's experiences when interacting with it. For example, how satisfying, enjoyable, or motivating the interaction is. So, on one side, you're dealing with learnability, and on the other side, you're dealing with satisfaction. So, this evaluation goal is to satisfy both needs. Devices such as smartphones, iPads, e-readers, and also mobile apps continue to stimulate awareness about interaction design and usability. So, these gadgets continue to raise awareness on what is actually means by a good design and usability. Evaluation enables designers to check that their design is appropriate and acceptable for the people who will use it. There are many different evaluation methods. Which to use depends on the goals of the evaluation. Evaluations can occur in a range of places such as in labs, people's home, outdoors, work settings, and remotely using digital video conferencing systems like Zoom or Teams. or via distributed design and evaluation systems. So this evaluation has different methods. It can occur in a range of places, whether it's remotely or physically. Product evaluation, such as the ranking and commenting systems that retailers use to get feedback about their products, can also be thought of as a kind of evaluation. So a ranking and a commenting system in which the product gets the most feedback and ratings can also be thought as a kind of evaluation. So as you can see, there are many ways to describe evaluation. It could also be that ranking and commenting systems. Evaluation used to focus primarily on observing participants and measuring their performance during usability testing, experiments, or in natural setting, increasingly referred to as into the wild studies or research in the wild. See the chapter 2 or the previous video to evaluate design or design concept. But evaluation has become much broader, encompassing a range of methods, some of which involve working with participants remotely via digital and other technology. So before, it just observing participant in a lab. Now there's could be range of different places, that like in the wild, and then in the lab, and remotely, and it could be done in Zoom meetings as well. Others do not concern participants directly, such as modeling users' behaviors and analytics. So sometimes you don't need the participants, you just need to check the behavior and analytics. So the key here is that the understanding of what evaluation is actually changes over time. Now it becomes more complex. It could also be defined using those behavior and analytics. Modeling users' behavior provide an approximation of what users might do when interacting with an interface. These models are often done as a quick way of assessing the potential of different interface configurations. So, modeling users' behaviors in evaluation, it provides approximate on what the user will do when with an interface. So, what will it do with how it interacts with it. So these models are often done as a quick way of assessing the potential of different interface configurations. Analytics provide a way of examining the performance of an already existing product, such as a website, so that it can be improved. So these evaluations are closely related to interaction design and practice, because in user research, one of the things that you're looking is the usability. You're evaluating how usable the product would be on user research. So it can be done in this stage as well. So this is the missing piece of what we are discussing in the previous video. The level of control on what is evaluated varies. Sometimes there is none, such as in studies in the wild, and in others, there is considerable control over which tasks are performed, and the context, such as in experiments. The method selected will depend on several factors, including what the evaluation want to find out, the type of product, when in the design evaluation occurs, and logistical constraints such as cost and time. So there's a lot of factors when evaluating. That's why it's considered one of the hardest part, because it requires you to use your reflective thinking and problem-solving brain. Additionally, you need to specify the time or consider the time, which we will discuss in the next video. Basically, this form a concrete image of what we are actually trying to build. These are not complete on itself, as you will see later. The actual design study for iPad, so in the that will be discussed in the next chapter. Because the iPad was just recently released back then, they have a time constraints. So this should be considered in this evaluation as well as in research, user research, which we discussed in the previous chapter. So you can see, guys, the sequence are kind of blurry. That's why it's hard, there are many things to consider at different touch point at a specific time. The why, what, where, and when of evaluation. Conducting evaluations involve understanding not only why evaluation is important, but also what aspects to evaluate, where evaluations should take place, and when to evaluate. So, conducting evaluation requires you to prioritize as well. What aspect you want to evaluate based on the time requirements, the resources. Where would you evaluate? Can you do that in this interface, or are you really using the right interface? So we're gonna go back to user requirements or understanding the actual problem and when to evaluate. So sometimes you need to consider your motivation. Sometimes you're not motivated to evaluate, so maybe you need to schedule it in a different day. So that's the key point in this. Why evaluate? User experience involves all aspects of the user's interaction with the product. Nowadays, people expect much more than just a usable product. They also look for a pleasing and engaging experience from more products. Simplicity and elegance are valued so that the product is a joy to own and use. Privacy is also important, especially for apps that record personal health and financial data. So, user experience is the overall interaction, while usability is actually part of this overall experience. Now, simplicity and elegance are valued because this Alright. So, the simplicity sometimes or the joy to use are required. So the key is joy because simplicity could be misleading, which we will discuss later. From a business and marketing perspective, well-designed products sell. Hence, there are good reasons for companies to invest in evaluating the design of products and to assess how popular the product is in the marketplace. Evaluation data enables designers to focus on real problems and the needs of different groups of people and make informed decisions about the design rather than on debating what each other likes or dislikes. So instead of you debating with your teammate or your coworker, you use evaluation to find the objective truth on what actually the user find joy to use. It also enables problem to be fixed before the product goes on sale or to be improved during its use. So these are the reason why evaluating a product is important. So it's the latest innovation in office safety. When your computer crashes, an airbag is activated so you won't bang your head in frustration. As you may know, teenagers tend to use different kinds of social media compared with most adults. While both use WhatsApp and Instagram, teenagers mostly use TikTok and Snapchat, whereas adults mainly use one or combination of Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. 15 years or so ago, more teenagers used Facebook, but as their parents started to join Facebook groups, they moved to other social media platforms. That's not to say that you won't find teenagers still on Facebook. Hence, social media usage by two groups can both diverge and overlap. In general, teenagers are more likely to upload a lot of selfies and photos of themselves and of places they have just visited on sites such as Instagram or send them to friends on WhatsApp. Adults tend to spend time discussing news and their families. So again, teenagers want to upload photos of themselves and places they have just visited and then send them to friends. And then adults want to discuss news with their families. Privacy may be concerned to people in both groups. So in evaluating these two types of people, you have to know what is the facts. So how do you get the facts? By conducting the right analysis and data gathering. So in general, after doing this activity, you should be aware that different kinds of people may opt to use different types of social media platforms, or they may use the same app in different ways. It's therefore important to include a range of different types of people in your evaluations. Involving different types of people also enables designer to tailor the interaction experience for different user group. So after you've done the research and the facts, it's also important to include a range of different type of people in the evaluation, because it helps you get triangulation. It also tailors the interaction experience for different user groups. So if you include a lot of different groups, the evaluation process is more efficient because you are able to find specific facts on different person, because what's true for one person is different to another. Now, what to evaluate? What to evaluate ranges from low-tech prototypes to complete systems, from particular screen function to the whole workflow, and from aesthetic design to privacy, safety, and security features. So as you can see, when evaluating, we also need to describe what. So in what, it's also complex because you need to consider prototypes. So how do you know prototypes? You go back on the previous video. So there's a low-tech prototypes to complete system, from a particular screen function to the whole workflow, and from aesthetic design to privacy, safety, and security and features. So how do you know what security to evaluate? You go back to the previous video. Developers of a new web browser may want to know whether people can find relevant items faster using it. So, if you're developing web browser, there's the fact is that you want to know if the user are able to find the relevant items faster. Developers of an ambient display may be interested in whether it changes people's behavior. Game app developers will want to know how engaging and fun their games are compared with those of their competitors, and how long people will play them. So if you're developing an ambient display, different evaluation is suitable for you. You may be interested whether it changes people's behavior. So again, you're running a test to make sure that you meet the user needs. Game app developers will want to know how engaging and fun their games. Government authorities may ask if an AI system for controlling traffic lights result in fewer accidents, or if a website complies with the standard requires for people with disabilities. So again, different organizations like this, government, an example, are concerned with if it's actually true that AI system result in fewer accidents. So that's a different goal than an ambient display, whether it changes people's behavior. Makers of a toy may ask whether 6-year-old can manipulate the controls, whether they are engaged with its fur cover, and whether the toy is safe for children. A company that develops health trackers may want to know whether people from different age groups and living in different countries like the size, color, and shape of the device. A software company may want to assess the market reaction to its new homepage design. A developer of smartphone apps for promoting environmental sustainability in the home may want to know if their design are teasing and whether people continue to use their app after a period of time. So, for promoting environmental sustainability, you want to know if people were teased and if they are continue using the app. Different types of evaluations will be needed depending on the type of the product, the prototype of the design concept, and the value of the evaluation to the designers, developers, and users. So it depends on different people. So this is how complex it is. It also depends on the prototype or design concept. So what prototype are you evaluating and what for? What product? They also depend on the product. So what aspects you want to evaluate for the following systems? A personal well-being app, a website for selling vintage clothes. First, you need to discover how well different people can select apps and websites that provide advice about topics that they are particularly interested, like mental health, relaxation, exercise, or diets for the well-being app, and the genre of vintage clothes. Other issues of concern may include how easy the app is to download, and use, and whether the onboarding support is useful, and how well people's privacy is protected. So as you can see, we use a lot of like knowledge here. Basically, we generate ideas by discovering how or the available apps and website that provides advice on personal well-being, and then you find the issues on that app with regards to usability goals for common to your users, which is the downloadability, whether the onboarding support is useful, and how well people's privacy is protected. So you're dealing with different kind of issues or goals with that is important to the user. So this is what to evaluate. People using the personal well-being app may want to find a particular topic of interest. People wanting to buy vintage clothes will want to move quickly among pages, displaying clothes, comparing them, checking their provenance, maybe looking at the item on an avatar of themselves and purchasing them. So again, this is kind of different behavior and different user. Other core aspects include how trustworthy and how secure the procedure is for collecting personal information and taking customer payment details. Navigation would also be a concern for both example. Where to evaluate? Some characteristics such as web accessibility may be evaluated in lab because it provides the control necessary to investigate systematically whether all of the requirements are met. So those are the evaluation things that we discussed in the previous one are only applied for ethnography studies, which are we're dealing with systems in the wild. So here we're actually dealing with the real product. So here sometimes we need to deal with a product in a controlled environment such as dock. This is also true for design choices such as choosing the size and layout of keys for small handheld device for playing games. Increasingly, apps, websites, and social media platforms are evaluated remotely by users distributed across the internet through the use of remote tracking. For example, websites can be evaluated with a group of people using remote data logging software, which can also be used to create analytics as discussed in Chapter 16, Evaluation, Inspection, Analysis, and Models. So, other than researching the competitors' common issue, that's one view of evaluating, you can also access real data on what is the actually specific logs or people behavior on the website. So those are another place for you to evaluate. The cost of conducting evaluation in a lab is usually more expensive than remote testing. Similarly, logical issues or ethical concerns may mean conducting remote evaluation is more feasible than running lab-based evaluations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, social distancing regulation prevent typical lab-based evaluation of virtual reality systems from being conducted in person. However, despite advances being made in how to conduct remote evaluations, the user experience aspects such as whether children enjoy playing with new toy and for how long before they get bored are still evaluated more effectively in natural settings, which are true is in the wild. So sometimes you need to do that in different places, such as in natural setting. Unlike a lab study, seeing children play in a natural setting will reveal how engaged they are when interacting with the toy and whether they play with it with their sibling or parents. In a lab study, the children are given instructions on what to do, which can guide and constrain their interactions with the toy. Of course, the researchers can ask the children whether they like it or not. But sometimes children will not say what they really think because they're afraid of causing offense. So, the researcher can also ask the children whether they like it or not, but sometimes what they say is not actually what they want. Sometimes you need to look at behaviors. Remote studies of online behavior can be conducted to evaluate interaction of participants with technology in their normal context of use. For example, in their own homes, places of work, or other settings where the researcher is not present. Using logging software, conferencing like Teams, participants' own video recording, smartphone, or self-reflection tools such as diaries. Some form of user testing, expert evaluation, and collecting analytics can all be done remotely. So, remote studies can also be used to study participants in their normal context of use, like homes, places of work, other settings that not present using logging software or Teams. Participants own video conferencing like smartphone or self-reflective tools such as diary. Some form of user testing, expert evaluation, and collecting analytics can all be done remotely. So this evaluation or testing can all be done remotely. It would initially important to conduct lab-based experiments using car simulator to see the effectiveness of the new type of feedback in a safe setting of carousel. You would need to find a way to distract the participants, perhaps by encouraging them to look pictures on your smartphone. So for this car simulator that we've discussed in the previous video, it would be best to do it in a lab first before in natural setting because it is safer. Once established as an effective mechanism, you would then need to evaluate it in a more natural setting such as racetrack, airfield, or safe training circuit for new drivers, which can be controlled by the experimenter using a dual control car. When to evaluate, the stage in the life cycle evaluation takes place on the type of product and the development process being followed. So, the life cycle of the product development will dictate when to do the evaluation, and also depends on the type of the product and the development process here specific to your company. For example, the product being developed could be a new concept or it could be an upgrade to an existing product. So those require different evaluation approaches. It could also be a product in a rapidly changing market that needs to be evaluated to see how well the design meets current and predicted market needs. So it could also be a product in rapidly changing market. In that circumstances or case, you also need a different evaluation needs. If the product is new, then considerable time may be invested in market research and discovering requirements. So if a product is new, then considerable time first should be invested in market research and discovering requirements, and then you use the appropriate evaluation using that kind of product. Once these requirements have been established, they are used to create initial sketches, a storyboard, or a prototype of the design ideas. So again, after you get the requirements, after the user research, you use that to create initial sketches of the product. These are then evaluated to see whether the designers have interpreted the requirements correctly and embodied them in their designs appropriately. So before you even get to the high fidelity prototype, you evaluate it immediately after you evaluate it using the initial sketches. So these initial sketches allows you to understand better, kind of like the act of writing allows you to understand better, or kind of like the act of speaking allows you to understand better. You kind of like thinking about thinking. After the user research, you create initial sketches and then you evaluate it before actually to test if you actually made the right assumption. But oftentimes you will make it as you get experience, right? The designs will be modified according to the evaluation feedback, and new prototypes developed and subsequently evaluated. So the designs will also basically these are then evaluated to see whether the designers have interpreted their requirements correctly. And then after that, It will be modified, the design and the sketches, to the evaluation feedback, and new prototypes developed, and subsequently you evaluate again before you actually test the next part of the design. When evaluations are conducted during design to check that the product continues to meet people's needs, they are known as formative evaluations. So, if the evaluation is conducted during the design to check the if it meets people's needs, it's formative evaluations. Formative evaluations cover a broad range of design processes, from the development of early sketches and prototypes to tweaking and then perfecting nearly finished design. So, if the evaluation are conducted during the design to check that's a formative evaluations. Now, formative evaluations cover a broad range of design processes, from the development of early sketches and prototypes to tweaking and then perfecting newly finished product. So it comes from the beginning until the end. Evaluations that are carried out to assess the success of a finished product are known as summative evaluation. So this is done after the product has been completely developed. If the product is being upgraded, then the evaluation may not focus on discovering new requirements, but may instead evaluate the existing product to ascertain what needs improving. So, if in case the product is just being upgraded, then the evaluation would not focus on discovering requirements. So you would not evaluate the requirements. So this is the key. This is useful because when discovering requirements, you're actually doing the 90% of the work. So if there's not enough like requirements yet, or kind of like if there's not a market yet when it comes to business, it's kind of hard to like be the first market. It's often easier if there's already an existing market in the business, because from there you know that there's a demand. So you just need to upgrade. So this is what this mean kind of yeah. Features are then often added, which can result in new usability problems. At other times, attention is focused on improving specific aspects such as enhanced navigation or making the product more aesthetically pleasing. So it's more about improving, but for that improving, you need to evaluate what you improve, because that could cause another usability problems. As discussed in earlier chapters, rapid iterations of product development that embed evaluation into short cycle of design, build, and test are common. In these cases, the evaluation effort may be almost continuous across the product's development and deployment lifetime. So, in the previous video, we discussed how this embedded evaluation in short cycle is important. So in these cases, the evaluation effort may be almost continuous across the product's deployment and development and deployment lifetime. For example, this approach is sometimes adopted for government websites that provide information about social security, pension, and citizens' voting rights. Many agencies, such as the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, the International Standard Organization, and the British Standard Institute, set standards by which particular type of products, such as aircraft navigation systems and consumer products that have safety implications for users, have to be evaluated. The European Union has a set of standards governing the product design that are created and managed by the European Standardization Committee, or CEN. There are also standards for web content accessibility guidelines, version 2.1, that describe how to design websites so that they are accessible to people with different physical, emotional, and cognitive needs. WCAG 2.1 is discussed in more detail in box 16.2. As you can see guys, there's an existing framework that are used in different use case for evaluation. So we don't even need to create our own evaluation requirements. This organization created that for us to test our product. Types of evaluation. We classify evaluations into three broad categories depending on the setting, participants' involvement, and level of control. These are as follows. Controlled settings directly involving participants, for example, usability labs and research lab. Participants' activities are controlled to test the hypothesis and measure or observe certain behaviors. The main methods are usability testing and experiments. Natural settings involve people, example are online communities and products that are used in public places. There is little or no control of people's activities to determine how the product would be used in real world. The main method used is in the wild studies. Any settings not directly involving participants, consultants, and researchers predict, and model aspects of participants' interactions with the product to identify obvious usability problems. So there's a control in the lab, there's a natural, and a setting where the participant does not need, which in this case indirect observations or experts critiquing it, and then there's a model which we will discuss later that we will test it against our product to identify the most obvious usability problems. The range of method includes inspections, heuristics, walkthroughs, models, and analytics. There are pros and cons of each evaluation category. For example, lab-based studies are good at revealing usability problems, but they are poor at capturing context of use. In-the-wild studies are good at demonstrating how people use technologies in their intended setting, but they are often time-consuming and more difficult to conduct, based on 2013 and 2020 study. Modeling and predicting approaches are relatively quicker to perform, but they can miss unpredictable usability problems and subtle aspects of the user experience. So modeling or indirect observation could miss unpredictable usability problems, but they are not that time consuming. Similarly, analytics are good for tracking the use of website, but are not good for finding out how the users feel about new color scheme or why they behave as they do. So it might not reveal why the people do what they do without actually researching it in the log. So another thing is that you might see it in the logs or in the data analytics, but sometimes you get surprised when, for example, you're working as a technical support and then you've only learned it using concept, and then during the real support you actually encounter a lot of different scenarios that is not included in that data analytics that you may not consider. That's why it's also important to do that, but it's important to remember that it's time consuming compared to just learning that. So it's kind of like the indirect observation provides you a quick way to get an overview, to get to the most important or most obvious usability concerns. Remote evaluation can be done with some of the studies in all three categories. They use the internet as a bridge to take interface evaluation to a broad range of network users in their natural work settings. Some evaluators have also turned to remote evaluation to involve large numbers of participants. For example, Abhishek and his colleague described findings from 8 digital health studies involving more than 100,000 participants in 2020. While the same condition encouraged remote evaluation today as in 1990, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered renewed interest in remote evaluation and development of tools to support it. Remote evaluation is discussed further in the next videos. Deciding on which evaluation approach to use is determined by the goals of the project and how much control is needed to find out whether an interface or device meets those goals. So again, it depends on the goals of the project and how much control, whether an interface meets the goal. This includes finding out how many people use it, whether they like it, and what problems they experience with the functions. In turn, this requires determining how they carry out various tasks using the interface operations. A degree of control is needed when designing the evaluation study to ensure participants try all of the tasks and operations for which the app or system is designed. So if you don't have control, the people may not actually do the intended product. So it's more fast. It's like an indirect observation when it's controlled, because you're able to direct the user's action instead of relying on unexpected behavior that could arise in a natural environment. So it's a balance. Controlled settings involving participants. Experiments and user tests are designed to control what participants do, when they do it, and for how long. They are designed to reduce outside influences and distractions that might affect the result, such as people talking or music playing in the background. The approach has been extensively and successfully used for many years to evaluate software application running on laptops and other devices. So, an experiment and a user test could be designed to control what participants do and what they do and how for how long. So like what I've said, it helps us to control the behavior. They are used to reduce outside influences and distraction, such as music in the background. The approach has been extensively and successfully used for many years for software application running on laptops and other devices. Usability testing. Now, for controlled environment, you're mainly testing for usability. I mean, yeah, for whole UI or UX design. So, or interaction design. So, usability testing. Oh my god. This approach to evaluating user interfaces involves collecting data using a combination of methods in a controlled settings. For example, experiments that follow basic experimental design, observation, interviews, and questionnaires. So, usability testing combines different approach for collecting data, which we discussed in the previous video. It could be observation, questionnaires, experimental design. Often usability testing is conducted in labs, although increasingly interviews and other forms of data collection are being conducted remotely via phone and digital communication, for instance through Teams or internal or in natural settings. The primary goal is to determine whether an app or system is usable for the task conducted by the people for whom it was designed. So again, the primary goal is to determine whether an app or system is usable for the task conducted by the people for whom it was designed. This involves investigating how typical users perform on typical tasks. By typical, we mean the people for whom the system is designed. For example, teenagers, adults, and so on, and the activities that is designed for them to be able to do, such as purchasing the latest gadgets. It often involves comparing the numbers and kinds of errors that are made between versions and recording the time that it takes the people using it to complete the task. As participants perform the task, they may be recorded on video, and their interaction may also be recorded by logging software. User satisfaction questionnaires and interviews can also be used to elicit by typical, we may often comparing the number of times. As participants perform the task, they may be recorded on a video, and video interaction may also be recorded by logging software. So, You record the participants as they perform the task to test the usability. So you're combining different methods here, like data gathering, evaluation, and then other tools or technology. User satisfaction questionnaires and interviews can also be used to elicit opinions about how they like the experience of using the system. This data can be supplemented by observation at product sites to collect evidence about how the product is being used in the workplace or in other environments. So, this data could be supplemented by an observation in the actual environment. Observing people's reaction to the active product has helped developers reach an understanding of usability issues, which would be difficult for them to glean simply by reading reports or listening to presentations. The qualitative and quantitative data that is collected using these different techniques are used in conjunction with each other to form conclusions about how well a product meets the needs of its users. So this qualitative and quantitative data got from this information gathering of your usability, which combines a lot of different knowledge, will be used to form conclusion about how well the product meets the usability. Usability testing is an established essential HCI process. For many years, usability testing has been a staple of companies, which is used in the development of standard products that go through many generations, such as word processing systems, database, spreadsheets, personal systems, and database management systems. Tools are available for making usability and software testing easier and faster. For example, TestRail offers management support to run automated tests and flexible templates to document tests with screenshot, like guru99.com/testing-tools.html. The findings from usability testing are often summarized in a usability specification that enables developers to test future prototypes or versions of their product against it. So there's also tools that allows you to do it automatically. Optimal performance levels and minimal levels of acceptance are generally specified. So optimals and minimal levels of acceptance, you should specify that to check against the current levels. Changes in the design can then be implemented just as to a navigation structure, use of terms, and how the system responds to users. These changes can be tracked as well using these tools, powerful tools that combine a lot of this knowledge. While usability testing is well established in UX design, it also gained more prominence in other fields such as digital healthcare, particularly as mobile devices takes an increasingly central role in hospitals and for monitoring one's own health, using Fitbit, Apple Watch, and so forth. A trend reported by Catherine White from the Nielsen Norman Usability Consulting Group is that while usability guidelines have tended to be stable over time, audience expectations about the attractiveness of the visual design have evolved. However, Kate from Nielsen Norman continues to stress the importance of basic usability. People still need to be able to carry out their tasks effectively and efficiently. Experiments form the basis for early usability testing. They are still used in situations where two similar designs that differ in small ways needs to be compared. For example, to compare two different fonts on the homepage of a website, experiments are typically conducted in a tightly controlled lab conditions or remotely. So here, a Fitbit. So there are several usability issues to consider. Some that you might particularly interested in finding out about include how comfortable the device is to wear, how clearly the information is presented, and what information is presented. What other information is presented, for example, time, what other features there are, for example, having Alexa built in, how long the battery lasts before it needs to be recharged, and so forth. Most important of all might be how accurate the device is, particularly for recording the heart rate that is concerned for you. Since these devices are worn on your wrist, they can be considered to be fashionable items. Each offers at least 4 colors. Do you prefer a particular color that is offered for one of the designs? How important it is to have a watch and to have Alexa built in? Is it worth $32 more? You might be interested in how Bulky each is in case it rubs on your clothes and causes damage, and whether the devices are discreet or clearly noticeable. Might privacy important to you? If so, you would want to know about the personal data collection policies for both devices. You might also be interested in what other people think about the product. There are so many potential issues to consider, and the relative importance of each will vary between different people. What is important to you may not be important to a friend. Increasingly, people look at star ratings and comments before making a purchase. Do you consider this to be a form of evaluation? So, this is a Fitbit. Let's watch this usability testing 101. So, I think the sound is working now.
Usability testing, sometimes called user testing, is a very popular and useful UX research method. In my opinion, it's essential for any UX researcher's toolbox. In a usability testing session, a researcher, called a facilitator, asks a participant to perform tasks, usually using one or more specific products or services. While the participant completes each task, the researcher observes the participant's behavior and listens for feedback. So why do we need usability testing? Well, even the best UX designers can't design a good user experience without iterative design driven by observations of real users. Usability testing is a great way to collect those observations. In particular, we often use usability testing to find problems in the design. So where do people get stuck? What confuses them? What errors do they run into? And on the more positive side, usability testing can also help us to discover opportunities to make improvements. We can generate excellent design ideas by first deeply understanding the problems that exist, and then determining how we might solve those problems. Finally, usability testing is a great way to get to know the people you're designing for. You can get a better sense of how your specific users see the world and what they want from your designs.
So again, usability are incredible. Even if you have like a great talent, it allows you to actually see the users interact with your product. It also helps you learn more about the users. So users are complex. You learn a little bit about them over time. Living labs have been created to evaluate people's everyday lives, which would be simply too difficult to assess in usability labs. For example, to investigate people's habits and routines over a period of several months in a smart home. An early example of a living lab was the Aware Home, in which the house was embedded with a complex network of sensors and audio or video recording devices that recorded the occupants' movement throughout the house and the use of the technology. This enabled their behavior, for example, their routines and deviations, to be monitored and analyzed. An early motivation for such studies was to evaluate how real families would respond and adapt to such a setup over a period of several months. However, it proved difficult to get families to agree to leave their own homes and live in a living home for that long. Living labs can be large and may house hundreds and even thousands of people. So these are basically like testing a product in a massive scale. So you're actually doing a natural setting or ethnography in a controlled environment. So the dilemma is how artificial to make the more natural setting. Where does the balance lie in setting up to enable the right level of control to conduct research and evaluation without losing the sense of being natural? Now, in the world studies, okay. In-the-world studies are a way of observing technology usage in a natural setting with little or no evaluator involvement or presence. In the early days of usability evaluation, evaluators realized that they need to understand how prototypes and other design products were used in natural settings outside of the lab by observing and talking with users. During the last 20 years, there has been a trend toward conducting in-the-world studies in which evaluation had less and less control over and direct involvement with the study participants. Since this approach is adopted in research as well as in evaluation, it is called research in the wild, as mentioned in Chapter 2. Help identify settings for new technologies, inform the requirements for a new technology design based on its situ observations, introduce new technology interventions for or inform deployment of existing technology in new contexts, enable extended engagement with the technology, So it allows you to inform the requirements based on that environment. It introduces new technology or inform deployment on how you deploy the actual product. Enable extend engagement with the technology. It also enables extended engagement with the technology because it's more natural. Methods that are typically used for in-the-wild studies are observation, interviews, and interaction logging. Again, observation, interviews, and interaction logging. The data takes the form of events and conversations that are typically recorded through audio or video recording or by participants as diaries and notes. The goal of the evaluators is to be unobtrusive and not to affect what people do during evaluation. However, it is inevitable that some methods will influence how people behave. So, you want to be unobtrusive because you're trying to do that in the wild. That's the reason why you're doing it naturally. But sometimes some form of data gathering, such as video, can make people feel self-conscious and change how they behave or choose to interact with the technology intervention. In-the-wild studies involve looking at how new technologies or prototypes are deployed and used by people in various natural settings such as outdoors, in public places, and in their homes. Sometimes a prototype that is deployed is called disruptive technology because the aim is to discover how it displaces an existing technology or practice. So sometimes the prototype that you will deploy is disruptive technology because the aim is to discover or to displace existing technology. So it's so useful when it comes to doing that. The downside of handing over control is that it makes it difficult to anticipate what is going to happen and to be present when something interesting does happen. This approach contrasts markedly with usability testing, where there is always an investigator or camera at hand to record events. Instead, the evaluator has to rely on the participants, allowing them to use an installed technology intervention. In-the-wild studies can also be run virtually, where observations take place in multi-user games such as World of Warcraft, Fortnite, and Minecraft, online communities, chat rooms, and so on. The main goal of this kind of in-the-wild studies is to examine the kind of social processes that occur in them, such as collaboration, confrontation, and cooperation. The researchers typically becomes participant and does not control the interactions. So you may think that you can only do that in natural settings. You can also do that live in online games. Virtual studies have also become popular in geological and biological science because they can supplement studies in the field. Increasingly, online is partnered with the real-world experience so that researchers and students get the best of both situations. So, in the world are getting partnered online so that you can get the best of both worlds. And then we'll continue with the next on the next video. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video. Peace.